Welcome back to AgriTalk from Washington, D.C. We are joined today by members of the Iowa and Missouri Farm Bureaus, and we're very happy to be with them and very happy to have with us South Dakota Senator John Thune, a member of the Senate Agriculture Committee. Senator, thank you for being with us. I mean, this group already this morning has had to hear about how serious our budget deficit is and about how serious some of the EPA challenges are with proposed regulations. Can you bring us any good news this morning?
Yeah, I feel like the Grim Reaper. I think that the good news is that American agriculture has been a good news story the last few years. I think that I'm worried about the cloud that hangs over us out there with these higher input costs and unpredictability of energy prices and the debt, which I think could impact interest rates and some other economic factors. But I think that this is a great country with great people. We've overcome big things before. We can do it again. I mean, we've seen generations that have, weathered a Great Depression, survived 2 world wars, gone through economic downturns. We can do this, but we definitely have to change the way we're doing things today.
Well, let's talk about a rallying cry for agriculture, concern over EPA, and you've addressed this as well. Now, Administrator Jackson has denied all these concerns that agriculture has about EPA overreaching and overregulation, whether it's dust or spray drift or whatever it may be. Are you buying that, or are you legitimately concerned that EPA is threatening our ability to produce food, fiber, and fuel in this country?
Well, my view is that I think and this is true of politicians generally, you can't judge people by what they say, you have to judge them by what they do. And there's a disconnect between the rhetoric coming out of EPA and out of this administration and the actions. And so all I can do is say, okay, look, this may be what you're saying, that you're interested in doing a regulatory review and making sure that this doesn't create economic hardship for people in this country, but the facts on the ground are very different, and the policies that are being put in place demonstrate to me, like I said earlier, I don't know how else to characterize it, but almost an open hostility to the center of the country, to the place where our producers live and where they make their living. And so I'm very concerned about these policies coming out of the EPA, notwithstanding what they say. It strikes me at least that they do have an agenda, and that agenda is not one that's conducive to the prosperity of American agriculture.
Let's look ahead to the Farm Bill. It's going to be quite a battle. It's probably going to come down to the wire again next year. In the meantime, you're still dealing with all these budget issues. It's hard to imagine how do you write a farm bill till you know what the budget is.
Well, I think that's true, and that's why last year, I mean, I said this before, I said it in my remarks, but how do you run a $3.7 trillion enterprise like the federal government and not even pass a budget? Well, that to me is the most fundamental responsibility to the taxpayers that we have. And last year, of course, it was a Democrat majority in the House and the Senate last year. We didn't get a budget. Now, we will pass a budget this year in the House at least. I don't know about the Senate. We're not in control there. We don't control the agenda. But I do believe that it's important that we have a budget because that will sort of lay out the pathway for how we deal with the next farm bill.
Let's talk about direct payments. You addressed this earlier. They look like they have a bullseye on them. It's hard really kind of to defend them with high commodity prices, but we know that commodity prices are going to come up and down. There's talk about, do we go to some kind of trigger level where you don't get them every year, but if prices got low enough, they would kick in? Or do you move that money to crop insurance? Or do you just leave it the way it is? How do you view direct payments?
Well, I think that they're not as important in my state as they are in other parts of the country. And obviously, a farm bill is a consensus product. We all work together. We represent different regions of the country, but we've learned in agriculture that we all hang together or we hang separately. So, we have fought for various elements of every farm bill. The other, if you want to call them the 3 legs of the stool, the safety net, the countercyclical payments, LDPs, they are based upon market prices, and that's a good thing because when market prices are good, it means that those payments aren't going out. And I think that's a story that doesn't get told often enough, is how much the taxpayer support for farm program payments has gone down as a result of good commodity prices. The direct payments are different, and that's why I think they're a target. And I suspect that they will be, they're going to be in the middle of the discussion. I just hope that we can ensure that if direct payments are harvested, that they're harvested to do something else in the farm program, i.e., as you mentioned, strengthening crop insurance or something else, as opposed to being used to fund some other part of the government. So I hope that we can make that happen if it happens.
Okay, real quick. Should land be taken out of CRP for crop production? I know you're from pheasant hunting country.
Well, I think that these are all decisions that we are going to be faced with, and I think farmers are going to make a lot of the decisions based upon what's happening in the marketplace. And if they view it as a good economic decision to cropland that they previously had in CRP, they may decide to do that. I think that the CRP program, there's land in South Dakota that probably shouldn't be plowed up again, and frankly is better planted into native grasses or something like that. And of course, as you said, we benefit from wildlife habitat and production as a result of that too, and that's big to our economy. So it's a debate we need to have, but I think we need to have a good, strong, robust conservation program in this country. But we also need to make sure that we're producing enough food and fiber to keep up with the demand, and the demand continues to grow, and that's a good thing for American agriculture.
More with Senator Thune. We'll talk trade next on AgriTalk. Welcome back to AgriTalk in Washington, D.C. We have members of the Missouri and Iowa Farm Bureau with us, and we have South Dakota Senator John Thune. All right, let's talk trade. It looks like you're going to get a chance to vote on the U.S.-South Korea Free Trade Agreement. We don't know yet, even though, as we heard Chris Harden say, we keep hearing that Panama and Colombia are important to this administration, but we have not seen any action to move those two agreements forward. Your thoughts, first of all, on the Korea Free Trade Agreement and this recent proposal by Senators Hatch and Baca saying that if all three of them aren't together, that might keep them from voting for or supporting Korea, kind of an all-or-nothing strategy. Are you concerned about that?
Well, Mike, I would be, except for the fact that we just haven't gotten anywhere with these trade agreements. I mean, remember, these are trade agreements that were negotiated and signed in the previous administration. The Obama administration has had now more than 2 years to submit these to Congress. All they have to do is submit them. We're ready to ratify them. Why aren't they doing it? And so, again, I'm sympathetic when they send people up who say, we're for these and we're for trade. We want to double trade the next 5 years. But again, don't judge people by what they say, judge them by what they do. And for 2 years now, we have had no evidence whatsoever that they are serious about getting these trade agreements ratified. And in the meantime, our exports to Colombia in 2009 went down 45%, and last year went down 48%. And you've got the EU and Argentina and Brazil and Chile and Canada and Australia stepping in and signing bilaterals with all these countries and taking away market share in the meantime. So we need them, and so when you say should they all be together, ideally we ought to be able to move them. If we need to do South Korea, let's get that done. But I think what our guys are saying out of frustration is let's get these done. And if it takes that kind of an approach to get them done, then I'm for whatever it takes to get these things done.
So we'll see what happens with the other two. But as far as Korea, do you think there will be the votes to pass?
I think there will be. There's still the issue with beef, and we're still, finessing that. But I think there will be, and I certainly hope so. I know there will be in the House of Representatives. The question is in the Senate. The labor unions have a lot of sway over a lot of the Democrats, but I just think that it's so compelling, and the rationale for opening markets, expanding demand worldwide. 90% of the world's population lives outside the United States. We have got to be aggressively opening up these markets to American agriculture, and it's high time we did it. It's past time we did it.
Okay, let's wrap it up with this. Crystal ball, your budget prediction here. When are you going to come up with this budget? When do you think it's going to get done? And this whole battle over how much do we cut and where, how do you see this playing out?
Well, right now, as I said earlier, we've got last year's unfinished business on top of this year's budget. So we've got overlapping budgets right now. We're still doing the 2011 budget while we're trying to start the 2012 budget process. The House of Representatives will move a budget probably sometime, I would say, April timeframe across the floor, and then it will be up to the Senate. As I said, my party does not control the Senate, and so it'll be up to the majority to decide whether they want to do a budget, and if they do, what it might consist of. But I hope we get one done this year. I think it's a national embarrassment when you have a $3.7 trillion taxpayer liability out there and spending, and you don't even come up with a way that you're going to prioritize how you spend their money.
Do you think, is there the political will and is there the personal will of the people of this country to make the sacrifices and the cuts necessary to balance this budget and get out of this deficit?
I think that people are increasingly acceptant of the fact that there are going to have to be some hard decisions made. And and aware of what the consequences of inaction are. Because if we don't do this, we will saddle the next generation with a lower quality of living and a lower standard of living than what we've experienced. And it seems to me, at least, and you got people here from Iowa and Missouri, two heartland states, hardworking people in this room who understand the concept and the idea of sacrificing for the next generation. We've gotten away from that here in Washington. We need to return to that, and I think the American people will support it as long as it is fair. As long as we're not doing this on the backs of one particular industry or one particular area of the budget, and I'm going to be making sure that they don't do it on the backs of American agriculture, and that's going to be a battle.
South Dakota Senator John Thune, thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. All right. We'll take a break, come back with former Congressman Charlie Stenholm next. It's halftime on AgriTalk.